Hey, howdy, hello, welcome back into T1A. Happy to have you here with us. We're diving into some reactions to the Combine today, seeing who did well, who did not, and how that could affect their draft capital. Let's get into it.
Hey, welcome back in, everybody. We're going to go over some combine reactions today. It was a pretty good combine. We got a lot of stuff that we thought was going to happen, got cemented, and some stuff that we didn't really think was going to happen, happened. Running backs went all over the place. Wide receivers, disappointed, I believe everybody knew that. And there was one star of the show in Anthony the Freak Richardson.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to dive into all of that. To get going first, actually, hey, was I on the video when you were doing the intro?
Yeah.
Dude, I didn't know that. So let's get started with a group with a group at the combine that actually came out and showed out. We didn't really think they were going to do all that great. I mean, we did know it was going to be a good class, but we had some really standout guys. And I think Tony, you should start us off on this one because I think you had a better grasp on some of the guys. Everybody knows who I'm going to talk about.
Overall, the tight ends had a great group representation at the Combine this year. We had some good speed, some good quickness, some good hands. I knew I liked Mayer, Kincaid coming into there. But I think at the Combine, Darnell Washington and Sam Laporta really surpassed and kind of surprised me. Whatever expectations I had for the rest of the tight end class. Darnell Washington came in, had a 4.64 40 time, and given that he's 6'7", 264 pounds, his adjusted speed score is in the 96th percentile.
That's a big dude trucking down the field.
Yeah, that's a lot of man.
Yeah, that's a whole lot, dude.
You're going to add in his great hands, his all right route running, and what NFL teams love, thus seeing the improvement in the draft, his NFL draft capital, is his power to block. You see how much that affects the Niners running game, how much Kittle's able to get in there and block.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could have a similar, probably not as effective. I mean, coming from Iowa is different than Georgia. He annihilated that sled. He was throwing it around like it was some little middle school kid that he's playing against while everybody else was trying to move Thor's hammer.
He's a big ass dude. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, even just watching the sleds, you're like, really? Like, did they add more weight for everybody else, or did he just blow that thing away? His unfortunate side is he's got limited tape with Brock Bowers coming into Georgia this last year. But I fully believe that he'll be picked up in some random spots throughout the second round for tight end premium leagues, and definitely can be locked in for the late second for non-tight end premium now.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. I think that Washington definitely did show out for the tight ends. Laporta did really well, athletically testing. The one thing I always worry about these guys is that, you're trying to take college production and transfer it over to NFL production. And when these guys don't show a lot of college influence in their offense, it does raise some questions for me on those guys. Darnell Washington doesn't really raise a lot of questions because we know he was playing behind.
Well, when an elite talent comes out and overtakes you, there's not much to be said.
That is true, right?
Look at the battle at LSU, over those receivers.
You still got to worry about, it's guys like David Njoku. And I had another one in the top of my head that I was going to fucking put out there. Who's another guy tested Irv Smith. Yeah, god damn. Irv Smith is another one, athletically tested well, had a lot of hype coming in, played at a big school, SEC, all that kind of crap. But then just shit the bed in the NFL. Hasn't really done anything. Yeah. I mean, the Vikings even went and traded for TJ Hawkinson to overtake him. So those are concerns I have. Do you have any concern that Darnell Washington is going to split the seam or be able to block or be able to post up and catch, little pop routes? No, I don't think you have any concerns about that.
Not at all.
Yeah. So the guy I want to talk about, I still believe is the most all-around best tight end in the draft right now. It's Michael Mayer. I'm still holding him as my number one guy in my rankings. We drafted him at 2-2 in our mock draft. I think he didn't do anything to change that other than possibly because of the way he tested and how slow he ran. he might get overtaken by like Kincaid or even Darnell Washington. Okay.
And I really don't think it's affected his draft capital at all. You know that he's a well-rounded tight end.
Yeah.
His decent speed. He's not burner, but he knows how to get into spots. He knows how to read zones. So that's what you're looking for.
He progressed year after year, had a breakout age of 20. So like he's shown that he can produce. He had 105 targets last year. 809 yards wasn't his career high, but it was pretty close. But he did have a career high in touchdowns with 9. So he is productive in an offense. Is he Travis Kelce? No. Is Dalton Kincaid Travis Kelce? Has a better chance at doing it.
Chance, right? But it's hard.
Same type of player.
Same
type of player. Michael Mayer's not Travis Kelce. He's not going to come in. He's not going to be that guy. Just shout out to Talon. I think he had the best one. He comped him with Jason Witten.
Yeah.
And that's fine with me because Jason Witten was I'm dating myself. Jason Witten was a top drafted tight end back before tight end premium and all that shit was going on. Back when I was, 20, 21, 22, Jason Witten was a sought after commodity because he had 80, 90 catches a year, touched 900, 800 yards, and 8 or 9 touchdowns. Like that was what you got. And in today's NFL, that's putting you as a top 5 tight end. And in fantasy, that's gold right there. Like you have a top 5 guy, you're locked in at tight end.
And that long ago, you were looking for people just to receive in the tight end position. They're like, oh, he got 3 receptions this game.
Dude, Jeremy Shockey days. Remember Jeremy Shockey?
The 1 year.
Come on. He had more than that. He was a beast. Michael Mayer, too, beast at Notre Dame. When he was 19 years old, he had 17% of the target share. At 20, his breakout year, he had only 22% of the target share, but just showed out. And last year, he had 31.1% of the target share. To have over almost a third of your team's targets, that means either you're the only guy that's a badass or you're just actually pretty goddamn good. And I'm going to lean towards Michael Mayer still being pretty good. Like you said, it's not going to affect his draft capital. He's still going to come out and be a first-round draft pick, along with, potentially Dalton Kincaid, which there's the scare part of people dropping Mayer down the board just enough, and Kincaid overtakes as the number 1 tight end.
Or Darnell. Like, that's how good of a combine he had. Like, it could sway some risk-taking GMs out there.
It could.
For an all-star, the Raiders.
Yeah, it could sway them.
Mind, but
yeah, it could sway them. I mean, I don't know where his draft, where the NFL thinks he's going to go right now. I don't think second round seems early, but with the way everybody's looking for playmakers and what he put on at the combine and showed how athletic he was. Yeah. So yeah, and then of course, depending on where he goes, but yeah, he could definitely shoot up draft boards. I think that, like we're saying, his lack of production is going to bring up questions. If you're a Darnell Washington guy, dude, don't hold back. I mean, if he's there at the beginning of the second round and you're deciding between Kincaid, Mayer, and Washington, and you think Washington is a better player, take Washington then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
go athletic ability. Yeah. That's fine. It's going to be hard to gauge because it's going to be 2-3 years before you really come to fruition about what you chose, what's available for you.
Hopefully just the 2. So, all right, let's quit rambling on about tight ends. Let's get into like the big boys, the bad boys. Let's talk a little bit about running backs. Tank, you got the crown jewel here this year.
I did, and everybody seems to be poo-pooing on him. So I took Bijan Robinson as somebody I wanted to talk about because everybody is just overblowing what happened with Anthony Richardson and forgetting that Bijan is a ridiculous prospect that's coming out. Nobody was really talking about what Bijan did because it was all kind of what we expected. He had, a great speed at 4.46 40. He came in measuring 5'11", 215, which, by the season, I bet he's 220. They're going to help bulk him up just a little bit. And there's not a lot of like those man beasts that are coming out anymore as NFL running backs. So if you can get a guy that's 21 years old, going to be the running back for his team for the next 4 or 5 years, why are you not going to draft him with the 101?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is another situation where like, why is it skipping my brain? Breece Hall. So Breece Hall last year, like people started questioning whether he should be the number 1 pick, and some drafts he may not have gone. And I don't know. That was a whole last year, but don't overthink this because Bijan is a better prospect than Breece is. Even if you land somewhere where it's going to take a year, it's an asset If you're a win now team and you somehow traded yourself into the 101, you're taking Bijan because that's a playoff run.
Yep.
And that's at worst case. I mean, he could very well come out and just like Zeke and Saquon did in their rookie years, ball out. So you need to, when worst case scenario is that you have a guy that's going to be a RB2, RB1 finisher every week as you're running through the playoffs, you need to make sure you're getting that guy. And if you're a rebuild team, you're going to take him because his value is going to do nothing but like what Jonathan Taylor's value's done. And you're pulling 2 firsts and a high-end player, 3 firsts in some cases we've seen.
Yeah.
And you take that, especially if you're a rebuild team, because that gets you another step in the direction of which you're trying to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't be screwing around and grabbing Anthony Richardson number 101.
One thing we didn't see is long speed from him. It's a 4.46 is good, especially his size, rating, his burst, all that coming together. He was in the mid to high 80s for his speed ranking, his burst scores. He had the 6th fastest time in the 40 and the 3rd fastest in his 10-yard split, which means he's fast.
He's a great accelerator.
And go, stop and go. And it shows when he cuts. And you see how fast he is when he plays. He's not a guy that tests well. He's a guy that plays well. Mm-hmm. And that's even more important because he's showed he did great at the combine, but he's going to do even better once he gets on the field.
Yeah, football players are football players. I mean, we're going to talk about this later on with another guy, but if you can ball, you can ball, and that's really what it comes down to.
Yep.
Bijan's got the size, got the pedigree. I mean, he's a football player. Don't overthink it. He's a top prospect. 4.46 is its top elite speed for a running back. And I don't want to hear the guys like saying, he doesn't have the breakaway speed, and quell that, because in the NFL he's going to be breaking big runs, and people are going to really enjoy watching Bijan play on Sundays.
Yeah, one of my things in my notes here is they get him to midfield, he could score.
Yeah.
He could take 40, 50 yards, no problem.
Definitely. Speaking of dudes who can go 40 or 50 yards, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm talking about Devon Achane. This kid is blazing fast. The only reason he didn't have a breakout year last year is because Isaiah Spiller. God damn, I'm bad with names right now tonight. Because Spiller was there, and this kid still put up 910 yards with Spiller there. And Spiller he was touted in the beginning as a top end recruit coming out of A&M. Kind of showed in his testing, and things kind of came out in the scheme. Here's the difference I see in Achane versus Spiller is that Achane ran a 4.3240. That is fast. Not to mention, he came in. Everybody thought he was going to be around like the 180 mark, like 182. Came in at 188, 5'9". Look, we all know he's not going to be an NFL thumper. He's not coming in. He's not a 3-down back. Those are few and far between. Stop looking for that guy. Start looking for the guy that's going to get put in the good positions and actually be able to make plays for his team. I'm not saying Achane went above Gibbs by any chance in this, because I still think Gibbs is a premier talent. He also ran a fast 42. I think, what was he, 4.39, something like that? 4.38 maybe? 4.36. I think you're right. So 4.36. I mean, just as fast, showed more talent, and actually played against, really, really good talent and really high end. I know A&M's in the SEC, but let's just talk about what was around him. He didn't have Alabama recruits around him. Still showed out. The kid can run between the tackles. I know a lot of people are going to say he's not, and I don't have the stats on me right now to prove it to you. But just go look it up really quick. It's not that hard to go look up, what's one we use? Lineup stats. Go to lineup stats and see his splits between the tackles. It'll surprise you a little bit. He can run between the tackles. He's not going to get used like that probably in the NFL unless he ends up in a stretch scheme and he's a one-cut burner, because he does have really good vision when he gets to the second level. His downfall is going to be his size. He is capable out of the backfield. 36 catches last year.
Yep.
Yeah, 36 catches last year. 24 catches the year before. He has proven he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's not going to run a ton of routes for you. He's not out there running, out routes and quick stop routes. He's not Christian McCaffrey, but he can get the ball from out of the backfield as a dump off, as a check down guy.
Swings and screens.
Yeah, and that's not what he's just limited to. I mean, he will be able to have the ability to learn more in the NFL. And I think people, wherever he goes to, I see them potentially using him. At least we hope, right? We always optimism. We hope he gets used right, and he's not just getting thumped in, and he is a reliever, and he ends up in a position of an Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon type of situation where he's going to see half the carries, and you just know you're going to see 10, 11 carries and like 5 targets a game baseline. And I think A-Chain becomes a high-end RB3 for you to use to good RB2 numbers through weeks and is a great flex play. Maybe not this year, right? Maybe it takes him a year to kind of find his groove, but I think in the years coming,
it'll probably take the right situation for him to come up.
Yeah, I think he's going to get. I mean, we have talked about this before with the turnstile that's coming in on running backs right now.
Yep.
And I still, like I said, I still think it's another year away. Like, I think you're still going to see a lot of these older guys are still going to hang around for another year, kind of quell these rookies that are coming in. But these guys, if they end up in the right spots, they're going to take off in year 2. So pay attention to guys like where A-Chain ends up. Of course, everybody already knows that, but it's a deep running back class. So watch where these guys go.
It's deep, but the talent's not supremely elite. There are a lot of role players in this draft.
Yeah, and we had a lot of role players last year too, but there's still, like there are diamonds in the rough. Nobody actually had Tyler Algier on their team because they thought he was going to be a 1,000-yard rusher last year.
Yeah,
it just kind of happened. But that's the reason why you want to do your due diligence on the running backs,
and it's also scheme coaching.
Yeah, true. I don't think anybody. I mean, I didn't guess that the Falcons were going to be such a run-heavy team last year. At least not like pound it and like they look like Tennessee light.
Yeah, well, Mariota there.
Yeah, and Arthur Smith too, but it would have been that offense could have been a little bit better. But yeah, it did work its way into Algier being a grinder.
Well, and they did lose a passing threat with Pitts. There is some change that happened there, but again, that's why Bijan should be your number 1.
Do you mean Ridley?
No, Pitts. Pitts was injured for the season. Yeah.
So we drafted A-Chain at 112 in our draft, and with how the receivers showed out, which they didn't show out, I think everybody pretty much agree with that. We had guys like Downs, Booty, those 2 guys. I don't think you're drafting those 2 guys right now.
They're not going to be in the first round unless they get amazing draft capital.
Yeah, and even then,
it's
we got to kind of wonder with what happened with wide receivers. How are we going to look in pro days? How is it going to look on draft capital? That's kind of the beauty of this year's draft. Yeah, it's kind of the beauty of this year's draft is that there is so much talent that like it's going to take through the draft to really sort out where these guys are going to end up in mocks and where people are going to start.
And how the NFL has value in them.
Exactly. Yeah, their draft capital. So let's get off of running backs now, because we can go on about these guys. There's a list of them, and we'll do another show probably gear on a just running backs, try to sort that whole mess out. But let's get into the wide receivers, because I brought up how disappointing they were. And I mean, there's plenty of cases. I know you have a couple of guys that disappoint the hell out of you.
Yep.
So go ahead and tell us a little bit about those guys.
First one I've talked about already in one of the previous videos about who I'm not going to draft, and that's Tank Dell. Yep. Nathaniel Dell. He came in. He was slower in his 40 than expected. He was smaller size and weight than expected. His hands weren't as good as expected. His only success during the whole thing was his go route, which is okay. But you see that in his film. You see him beating people deep, and that's it. But he's also going against, what was it, MCC, something, lower tier over at Houston.
I don't even know.
Exactly. Because nobody cares.
Point made.
But it really hurt his NFL stock, and thus drastically ruined his fantasy stock. Usually these small frame guys win on speed, quickness, and avoiding defenders. You think Rondale, he doesn't have the super long speed, but he's got all these athletic abilities. Well, Tank didn't show any of those things.
Yeah,
in this combine.
It's not like Moore's exactly panned out.
He came in and did a 4.49, which is fast, but it's not blazing fast for a guy his size. With his combine measurements and everything, his adjusted speed score was 6th percentile.
No bueno.
Horrid. His route running wasn't real smooth. He didn't show in the receiving drills that burst that you'd think a guy having the 3rd fastest 10-yard split was capable of. And early on, I had hope that Dell would be a sneaky grab like Kyle Phillips or Hunter Renfrow because he had that buzz during Senior Bowl. But everything else has just gone downhill since then. So I moved off of him, being in rookie drafts and stuff, to the point where I don't even know if he makes it as a drafted free agent.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Like, it would have been nice to see Nathaniel come out and run a faster 40. I mean, there were a lot of guys that ran, underwhelming 40s. Jalen Hyatt was underwhelming.
Yeah.
Like he almost put himself back on par with Cedric Tillman, I think, as far as those two are compared.
Yeah, he had some rock hands in some of those throws.
Yeah, and to be the guy that's known as, or what you showed last year at least, is taking the top off of defense and then come in and run, as what was it, just a sub 4.40. I think it was 4.46, 4.49, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
That's not very good considering what you're trying to pull off there. I'm going to talk about and continue my trend of guys that I have moved up in my rankings because of what took place at the Combine. In our previous draft, we took Jordan Addison, and that would actually be we as in me because I was the 1.6. Took Jordan Addison at 1.6. Gibbs went 1.7. QJ went 1.8.
Yep.
And then JSN went 1.9. So we took two wide receivers above JSN.
I was appeasing all the Ohio State fans.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of what drove JSN down, at least on my board, was just his limited ability, right? Like, you're going to be a slot guy. That's where you're going to go. Then he comes in and he measures out at 6 foot, 196 pounds, and doesn't run the 40 because a lot of people are saying he didn't run the 40 because he knew he wasn't going to run a good 40. And I'm on that same bandwagon. I think he knew he was going to come in and run like a 4.52 or something like that. And just everybody's going to freak out because he didn't have that top end speed. He wasn't going to be that elite wide receiver. I still don't think, and I know people have put him in the first round of the NFL draft in mocks. I don't think he goes there. I think because of his limited ability, he still is going to fall down to the early second round because he doesn't have the prototypical size and he is just that slot guy. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing for NFL teams to let him go to the second round, but if somebody takes him in the first round, I wouldn't shy away. Guys like this that have this type of elite athleticism, elite burst scores, he showed out in the cone drills and all the agility drills. He showed what he can do on the NFL field.
Don't let his route running too.
Exactly. What I needed to do was I went back and I watched a little bit of film on him again, just with a new perspective, understanding what he's capable of doing, seeing what his athletic scores are. And it kind of came more together for me, right? And I didn't want to dog him. I didn't want to dog him on last year because, he dealt with the injuries and all that kind of stuff. But you got to think he was on the field with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and still put up a 1,600-yard season. I mean, that's pretty badass. And you could say to the opposite side of that, well, he did all that because he had elite talent around him and yada, 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 whatever. But an elite slot wide receiver, Cooper Kupp, can change an entire team. JSN, I think he's going to end up in a really good spot because I think who takes him isn't going to expect him to be a number one wide receiver or even a number two wide receiver. He will not be an outside guy. He'll be a strictly slot guy. He's going to get run. And I think he's going to end up going somewhere. Like I've heard a lot of people say Baltimore. He doesn't fit in Baltimore. I don't see Baltimore doing that.
Nope.
So I think he's going to end up in a good spot where he's going to not be leaned on as the number one wide receiver or the secondary wide receiver. He's going to come in, he's going to play that slot role, and he can excel there. He showed it.
He improved a lot of things in this combine. Well, improved in rankings for a lot of people. Some people were already on him as their number one.
Yeah,
I wasn't that person. Still mixed on making him my number one receiver off the board, just because I really like Addison. I believe in his skills, his 4.5 or 4.49 or whatever he ended up running. That's fine. He runs that speed all day. In his breaks, out of his breaks. Addison is more of an elite route runner. A little more aggressive. But I think JSN really improved a lot of stocks with his combine.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me about Addison was what he weighed in at. That's rough. It makes it kind of hard to rely on that a lot. But you just look at guys like, Devontae Smith is, of course, the comp here. But he gets AJ Brown next to him and has a little bit of a breakout season, and he showed out in his rookie year too. The size, I'm not gonna lie, the size is what kind of scares me off about Addison a little bit. The 40 time, like you said, he's gonna run that in out of breaks. Like the guy can hit the brakes and then be right back to 4.49 like it's nobody's business. So great route runner too. I just think JSN. Yeah, like everything I'm putting on with JSN and why he would move up is because of my prediction that he ends up somewhere he's actually going to get used right, because NFL teams are going to know that he's just not an outside wide receiver.
Yeah.
At least I'm hoping.
Well, there'd be more expectation for Addison probably to be the one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or come in and be a really bright 2, like when Dallas took CeeDee Lamb. You know, they already had Amari Cooper there, and then it's just kind of like a transition, let the kid grow a little bit. But yeah, any top tier wide receiver that is in this year's draft, if they line up next to like a Devontae Adams or, you know, whoever the hell that's a top end wide receiver, I think they're going to have a pretty good year. The top guys.
Well, and that's when I was speaking about Addison in our previous video, that's what I talked about. I was like, I want him paired with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
He does have the skills, he does have the ability, but he still has, you can see he still has that like growth that needs to happen.
Yeah, you could see a CeeDee Lamb type career arc from his rookie year into where he is now, just depending on where he's at.
So let's move on to a couple guys that kind of had a rough combine in the sense they were next to each other. The combine goes alphabetically through the wide receiver group, the running back group. So Josh Downs and Zay Flowers got paired up next to each other for the whole combine. So every time one did the drill, the next one went right after them. It was good to see like two guys, back to back and get to see a good side by side comparison. Josh Downs outperformed Zay in the numerous things like the 10-yard split and the broad jump and the vertical. But the most important things, I wrote 2 originally, but they're 3 for wide receivers. It's the skills, their long speed, their hands and catching ability, and their route running. And in those, Zay outperformed Josh Downs. Zay also beefed up before the combine. They were coming in, pretty comparably smaller, and Zay beefed up. The Twitter feed that had the picture of him all ripped up, looks like his necklace shrank a size or 2.
Photoshop. Downs
came in a little bit lighter than expected, but those aren't significant factors alone. They as individuals looked great because they were side by side the whole combine. Zay took away from the combine with a better performance. So every time I would see Josh Downs go run a route, I'm like, damn, Josh looks good. That was smooth. And then Zay Flowers runs a route behind him. I'm like, damn it. Ran it better. Made it look, he just looked better. He got the ball right at the out of bounds line and turned inbounds. Just those little things that make NFL scouts ooh and ah, because they're looking at some of the details, some of the habits, some of the behaviors they have. And it just came down to Zay was a little more technical in everything route running.
Yeah, I agree. I think Zay looked really good. I like they put on the weight, still ran a decent 40.
Yeah.
And I felt like Josh Downs he gave me a little bit of like, I don't want to call it a letdown, but maybe it was my own hype build up on him a little bit because I did expect more from him.
Yeah.
But I still think that Downs at his height and weight, undersized guy, still showed in college at a over 90% contested catch rate. And he ain't catching deep balls, catch rate type stuff. Like he's catching stuff over the middle. Guy's fearless. Yeah. He's a pretty good NFL wide receiver. If he's put in the right spot, like a lot of these wide receivers and a lot of these questionable running backs, like we keep saying, it's going to come down to this draft capital where these guys end up at, and doing the evaluations on them. What's really going to separate the rankings on these guys right now, man, shit's tight.
I think if Josh Downs was next to pretty much anybody else other than, JSN, he would have been heralded of having a good combine. Mm-hmm. But because he's next to Zay, it's not as much talked about for both of them and or separately. Like they're just not as much attention was put onto them because of it.
And then in talking about groups separating and whatnot, we'll get into the group that I think actually tightened itself up a lot, and that's this quarterback group.
Yeah, those top
Young's
4.
Young's still my top quarterback, even though he measured in at 5'10" and 204 pounds.
He measured in at Kyler Murray.
Yeah, exactly. So, and he's not Kyler Murray running the ball, but
there was a photo I saw that showed Kyler Murray at playing weight and Bryce Young at playing weight.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked at 20, 30 pounds different. Like Bryce is just so much leaner, but also Kyler's more of a rusher. So
yeah, the kid is lean, but he can ball, and I mean he showed it. So on this one, I'm gonna let tape just go ahead and do it. If he shows out on his pro day and the front of the NFL and guarantees himself basically, a top 5 pick, there's been talk of Houston going out and getting Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know what the hell that's all about. But as this unfolds, I still think Bryce Young ends up as a top 5 pick. And then a guy that I was off on, and we even dropped in our drafts, hell, we ended up taking Oh God, I guarantee it was me again that did it. I gotta see real quick. Ah,
You took Levis over him.
Yeah, I took Levis over him. That's how off on CJ Stroud I was, right? And it wasn't. It was more to do with the kid transition over to the NFL, and I didn't watch a lot of tape on him. It was just kind of seeing some things here and there, and then it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And then I actually watched tape because everybody was talking about how well he threw at the combine, and holy crap, the dude was crispy.
Oh yes,
he looked good in footwork. He was hitting all the out. The kid has an NFL arm attached to him.
Yeah,
And
liquid butter with that arm.
yeah, and all it's going to take is ending up in the right spot. There's been a lot of talk of him going to Indianapolis, which I think is a good spot because they still have a good O-line. It's just been beat up a little bit.
Talk of how much Indianapolis like him. So
yep, Jonathan Taylor being behind him to help with the run game, take some of that play action for himself, and they already have a elite. Well, shouldn't say elite. They have a top tier wide receiver in Michael Pittman, a young talent up and coming. It's a good pairing. So CJ Stroud has moved up in my rankings. He is now solidified as my number 2 quarterback, which is probably going to freak some people out.
Yeah,
probably not.
Because a lot of people are on the Anthony Richardson 4-4-4 bus freak athletics going on.
Yeah,
which it is nice to be excited about that. I kind of worried once they started showing all the comps of who he beat and stuff. Those guys didn't do anything.
Yeah.
RG3 was up there, but then there was like Tyree Jackson, a couple other guys that just they were fast, but once they got to the NFL, that wasn't enough.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, at the NFL level, you got to be able to throw the ball. Lamar has kind of quelled some of that. I don't know if I want to put Anthony Richardson at the same level of runner as Lamar. I don't think he's Michael Vick. And Michael Vick showed that, he could bop around the field, but I don't think Anthony Richardson has that. Is he an athletic freak? Yes. Is he guaranteed to take over and get a spot in the NFL as a starter and be fantasy relevant for you? Yes. Right?
But he has to end up in the right spot. Now are a faster Cam Newton.
Okay. He has to end up in the right spot, though, right? It'll be interesting to see where he goes in the draft, what NFL teams think of him. I think he's probably going to end up being the top 10 pick, which is going to make it very hard on who to take as your top quarterback coming up in the drafts. But again, understand who's there, what franchise he goes to. It's going to play a lot into it because he also has, for as much upside as he has, this guy could fucking fall flat on his face. And we need to start kind of realizing that a little bit and just kind of quell it back down, get back to reality here a little bit.
Levis still is the 4th quarterback.
Oh, by far. Yeah. He's definitely separated himself out of the pack on that.
I think he had one of those, he had a great combine. It was good for him, but the other guys just proved out more. And so, there was guys, that when he threw the ball, there was that zip, that hum that goes on a guy that throws with a lot of force.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he tried to force a little too much sometimes.
He's going to be an experiment. It's going to be the whole class is going to be so cool to watch where everybody lands. I mean, if last year's draft was exciting, I think this year's draft is going to be even better.
There's going to be so much talent. I mean, fantasy wise for this draft, it's going to be fun because they're going to be sprinkled all over in the draft. That was a fantasy relevant guy. There's going to be a lot more of that this year versus last year where a lot of the running backs and wide receivers got pushed down just a bit.
Yeah, I think it's going to end up being just a prediction here, but I think the 3rd round will be running back row. Yeah. And teams will start picking off a lot of these guys because you're saying, situational players, and the NFL likes situational players. And a lot of these guys could fit on teams and find a role right away as running backs. The wide receiver is disappointing at the combine. I mean, I don't want to freak out about that because, 40 time doesn't depict whether a wide receiver is good or not. There's still a lot of work to do on wide receivers. Make sure you're doing your due diligence, everybody out there. Don't just rely on your YouTube channel, guys. We don't fucking know everything either. God damn it.
We're making educated guesses.
Exactly, right? Hypotheses. Do your due diligence on these guys and really pay attention to where they're going to land. It's going to be that kind of a draft this year. Your dart throws are now going to be, you have more opportunities to hit the bullseye this year, is what I'm saying. So pay attention to it. Take advantage of it.
Grab some mid-round picks, some 3rd.
Yeah, get your dart throws on. 2nd rounders are going to be hard to come by this year.
Get them thrown into your trades.
Yeah, 2nd rounders are going to become hard to come by this year. A lot of people are coveting those, and we can all see why. But yeah, 3rd rounders, you're going to see some some definite talent falling in the third round this year, I think.
There's going to be some talent that stumbles down. People that are higher up on certain players, and it's going to force that talent down.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting draft. I'm excited. We got free agency coming up. That's going to be exciting. We got the free agencies coming up here. We're already working our way through tags. Tag deadline's coming out. I don't know if our video will be out before the deadline. I don't even know. Maybe. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing to the channel. We got Tank Teaches coming out. I'm going to start trying to do a couple of solo things on my own, just quick little opinion pieces when I get the time. Keep looking for those. And that's about pretty much all we got. Bye, bitches.